Hello, my friends. This is Stephanie Ritter-Mott. First of all, Happy New Year and Happy New Decade. I am the president of Courageous Living, a life coaching business, and my desire is to help my clients go further and farther than they ever thought possible by maximizing the gifts and talents within them. And one of the ways that I do that is through a video, through my teachings through YouTube. And so in this video, we're going to talk about how to create the best decade ever. Now, I have been taking a free class from Mel Robbins called The Best Decade Ever. And you can go to melrobbins.com, Best Decade Ever. You can download this little booklet, and she'll send you some videos that she's doing. They'll send you a link for some information. It's very, very easy. But the whole goal of this is to train ourselves to think and dream bigger. And the whole goal right now is dreaming. That's where we're at in this whole class. And again, it's very easy to do. You can join at any point in time. We're 2 weeks in, this is our second week. You can join at any time and still catch up with all the materials. It's not a problem. But the whole goal is dreaming big. Because a lot of times when we try to dream big, we start hearing that little voice in our head saying, you know, you're not good enough, you can't do this, nope, you're not smart enough, you're not educated, you tried that 10 times before, you failed at it. And all these things come at us, and our dream goes from here, and it just slowly gets to this manageable phase. And so what I want to share is about dreaming big and the science behind dreaming big and why it's really important to just start dreaming big. Now, in the dreaming big, we're going to have goals that will come into play, right? Because as we dream 10 years of a decade, well, then as we chunk that big dreams, maybe 1, 5, whatever it is, as we chunk those dreams down, we're going to have some goals in place, but we're not there yet. Right now, it's dreaming big. Just really, you know, if the sky's the limit, money's not an issue, what would that look like for you? And so that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. And basically, you're training your mind to really see the impossible before it becomes possible. So your brain starts now kind of getting the picture of, oh, we're dreaming big. It's the impossible. You're already thinking at the impossible before it becomes tangible, before it actually happens. And so that's kind of like the whole process behind it. Now, when we talk about decade, remember decade, 10 years, right? Well, 10 years is 10 Christmases, 10 birthdays, 10 summers, maybe 10 family reunions if you have one every year, 10 Thanksgivings. When you think about it, 10, that's small. You know, if I said to you, you have 10 summers before 2030, what are you going to do with them? You'd be like, wow, 10. I've got to really maximize those 10 because that's 10, all right? And so a decade goes really fast. For some of you, this decade that we're in right now might be you're going to be an empty nester like me. Or maybe you are planning to get remarried or married. Or maybe you're going to start a family. Or maybe you are a high schooler who's just graduated, who's now going to be done with college and now starting a whole new career path. 10 years is going to be a lot of different things for everybody. But when you think about the scope of that, someone might be thinking of retirement. You know, so now you have some time to prepare for retirement. But you might be saying, you know what, in this 10 years, I'm going to be retiring. I think most people within the sound of my voice are going to be experiencing something very significant in the decade. Whether it's one of those things that I talked about or something else, I don't know. But 10 years is, in the long term, it's big, but when you think about what it really comes down to is 10, right? 10 birthdays, 10 Christmases, etc. So, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to look at 2019 and the last decade. And Mel Robbins does do that in this pamphlet. She has you kind of do a retrospect. And the reason why is because you really want to be able to celebrate what you've been through. Celebrate the victories, maybe celebrate the challenges because you came through the other side. Maybe celebrate the lessons that you learned through the last year and the last decade. And so that's one of the things that you're going to be doing, and I'm going to put this in the notes below. And you can also, when you download the booklet, it'll all be there too if you choose to sign up for the Mel Robbins. But I want you to start thinking about what were some of those victories that happened during 2019. For me, it was a pretty good year. I took my business in the social media route. I was doing some new things there. The last decade, I'm kind of glad that decade's over. All right? But when I wrote down the 5 to 7 things, for each of those, I realized there was a lot of things I really did accomplish during that time. So when I started doing my own reflecting, which again, I'll put this stuff in the bottom in the notes there, I wrote down the 5 things of 2019 that I was proud of, things that I learned, where areas that I grew, and also I wrote down 5 to 7 things for the last decade. Again, it's important to celebrate these things, even if there's mistakes. It's like, did you learn from them? Did you lean into those failures? Did you lean into those those mistakes that you made? So, and the last decade for me was a very challenging decade, a very hard decade. Financially, a lot of things. I started out the decade by being laid off after 18 years in banking. That came right on the heels of going through a divorce. Now I'm a single mom with 2 little kids in this house, and I'm trying to, what am I going to do? The recession hit at the same time. But when I started writing down and reflecting, I could have focused on the hard times. But I realized during that time, I never lost my home. We stayed in the same home for a number of years. I then sold that home, which I've never sold a home before. And then I moved us to a new city. I got a new job. I bought my first house by myself. I put my children in a really good school district. And I started writing this down going, oh my gosh, there was a lot of good things that came out of this. I know a very close personal friend of mine who, at the tail end of the decade, fought 3 different kinds of cancers that came against her. She survived, and she's doing much, much better. But I imagine, for her, part of that decade was, the health challenges that she faced. But then if she probably sat down and wrote it out, she'd realize, wow, as much as that was very hard, I made it through. The other thing I believe that's important about reflecting, especially in the last year, is that maybe there's some things that you can salvage in that year and work on them in 2020. Okay, so I believe that when you look back, for me personally, my word for 2019 was intentional, but you know what, during the end of the year, I kind of faded out on it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to make 2020, my word's going to be intentional. And I'm going to salvage some of those things that I just did not focus on and resurrect them in the next year and in the next decade. But so I think there is something that comes from trying to reflect back, is because sometimes you can salvage. Some things are just a season during that time where you're growing and learning, and then they manifest later on. So just because they didn't happen doesn't mean they're off the table, but maybe that season was to cultivate skills and talents, and now is the time for them to come to fruition. So that's why reflecting is so good. And the next thing that we're going to do is now write it down. Now, I know we talk about writing things down all the time, but remember, we're dreaming big. So we want to write down things that are dreaming big. You want to write a book, why not say, I want to be the #1 bestseller in mental health books, or I want to be the #1 bestseller in sports fitness books, whatever that looks like for you. Dream big. So take that goal that you have and maybe put it on steroids, and what would it look like if there was no limits? Money wasn't an object, okay? Write it down. Kind of do a brain dump. Now, I'll talk about what Mel Robbins mentions in the booklet, but when I talk about a brain dump, first of all, maybe just getting a notepad, just through a notebook. Just write it down and just write. Okay, you might write 20 things, 50 things. Just write them down. Just kind of get them all out. Things that you've been dreaming about, that you've been wanting to do or thinking about doing. Write them all out. Because what Mel Robbins does in the booklet is every single day that you are, one of the things that you're doing is you're writing down 5 to 7 things of your dreams for the decade. Now, they may change from day to day because, again, she's training you to kind of think big, kind of get out of those limits that we always have in ourselves and think big. And so you're writing these things down every single day. They might be the same and they might be different, and that's okay. Remember, there's no right or wrong to dreaming, okay? It's your dream. But I would encourage you to just just sit down and dump it all out and write as much as you can down. And then when you go to the book, or if you want to follow along with the notes below, writing out 5 to 7 things every single day. What are your dreams for the decade? Okay? And kind of get into that habit. Because again, we're also training the brain to start thinking big, all right? This comes into the brain part of it. The other thing that you're doing is when you write things down, you're 42% more likely to achieve those dreams when you write them down regularly. And remember when we talked about in the 5-second rule that neurological pathway that we're changing when we do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a person that studies the brain. But I think the same thing is happening, that if you're so used to setting very small goals because you want to meet them, but you're afraid to dream big because you're afraid of failure, or you're afraid of looking like a fool, you're changing the brain, the pathways, when you start writing down these really big dreams. And what's happening is that you're putting it into what they call external storage, and you're encoding. And so the external storage is really just writing it down, right? You're putting it either in your phone or someplace like that, or in a journal, or like on the 3M whiteboard that I'm going to talk about in a moment. But also you're encoding, so you're actually kind of changing the things. You're using kind of both sides of the brain now. You're writing it down, but now that's using one side of the brain, and then you're encoding it. And now you've got the perfect, beautiful path for this to ignite inside of you. Now all of a sudden, your brain is going, wow, we're dreaming big, and you're getting excited, and you're thinking of what are the possibilities. And then what happens the more times that you're writing this down is that now you're starting to train yourself to look for the things that line up with your dream. And even if the dream doesn't happen exactly the way you thought, again, you might have a super big dream here and you might land here. That's okay. That doesn't mean you failed. Maybe the second half of that dream is going to happen later on. I'm not really sure. You have to wait and see. Did you also know that when you tell a friend about the dream, that someone that really understands you, you've also upped the chances of that becoming a reality? I wanted to backtrack a minute. I was on Twitter the other day, and Maria Shriver's son had a quote up there, and he had a poster board, and he said there's 2 things his mom will encourage her kids when you come into the new year. And she'll say, what do you want to leave behind in 2019? And what do you want to start doing in 2020? And I thought that's a great tool to start with. And you could look at it as, what is it that you want to leave behind in the last decade? And what do you want to see happen in the new decade? Because that's what we're talking about, is the best decade. And then we chunk it down from there. But let's just keep the big picture of the decade. So what is it that you want to leave behind in the last decade? And what do you want to see happen in the next decade? And so I love that quote that she shared. I wanted to get that to you before I forgot. Okay, the next thing we want to do is a 7-day challenge. Now, again, this is something from the Huffington Post, and they do a 7-day challenge to encourage you to, they're talking about goals, but I'm going to say dreaming. They have 4 categories. And again, Mel Robbins is the same thing. It's every single week, every day of every week, we're writing our dreams down. And so you can do the same thing here. But again, something just to think about, however you want to approach this. But they talk about 4 key areas: health and relationships, love and relationships, vocation, and time and money freedom. And so what they're asking to do is every morning you're writing down, for the next 7 days, you're writing down your goals or your dreams in those 4 key areas. And I think that's really good because, again, we want to be healthy, spirit, soul, and body. And that's really what those 4 categories are addressing, is really kind of the whole person. And so you can take this any way you want. You can do the best decade ever like Mel Robbins and kind of really dream the big things, just whatever is out there, dream it. Or you can come down to 4 categories if you want. But I really want you to stay on the path of the dreams, and then we will then take one item in each of those areas and you can start focusing down. Now, dreaming big. Remember as a kid, we would dream all the time, right? We'd dream about what we want to be when we grow up. we would just dream big. No, there are no limits. Did you know that children hear the word no 400 times a day? You know, no, you can't do that. No, don't touch that. No, you can't do, no, 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 right? And when you get to an adult age, now it's like you're so trained to, no, you step out to do something, no, it's right, I can't do that, I'm not old enough, I'm not educated, I'm not this, I'm not that. And so that's why we're starting out with the dreaming big, because we want to silence those voices that have been telling us no, not purposely, you know, just we've heard it for so long that when we start to dream big, we immediately go to that default thinking of, oh, no, I can't do that. I'm not educated. I failed at that before. In fact, I failed at that several times before. Listen, stay on the big picture of dreaming big. We will chunk it down later, but right now I want you to learn how to get that brain to start thinking big. Get that negative thinking pattern, that default mechanism to go away. Changing that neurological path in your brain to say, we're not going to think small, we're going to think big, okay? We're going to think of what are the opportunities out there. And so there really is a science behind it. And so that's really the goal of this, is to really get you to tap into that and getting that brain, the left and right side, to start now firing up and then remembering the things. When you write them down, the brain then can remember it, and then boom, you're on your way. All right, lastly, I want to talk about passion versus igniting a flame. You know, if you ever had someone ask you, hey, what's your passion? And you're thinking, oh, I don't know, I mean, I love life, I love my kids, and you know, I'm guilty of this too. You know, for a long time we heard, especially in the life coaching business, you know, passion, passion, passion. What's your passion? Live your passion, design your passion. And I always struggled with that because I'm thinking, man, you know, what is my passion? You know, I don't know. I mean, I love a lot of things. And I love what Mel Robbins shares in this course, a video. It really helped me put it into perspective about passion versus what's igniting us inside of you. If you can't understand or think about what are you passionate about, you know what, it's okay. Because really what someone should be asking you is, what ignites inside of you? When you think about something, when you think about a goal or a dream job or a career path or a sports path or starting a business, all of a sudden you're going to start to feel something, excitement come up inside of you. It starts to ignite that flame inside of you. And it's the energy that starts to come up, right? All of a sudden you're excited, you know? It's like this energy comes there and you're like, wow, I can do that. I'm going to accomplish that. Passion is really what comes out of that. You can't, you know, looking for passion and what you're passionate about, it's kind of looking for, you know, having a treasure map and trying to find the pot of gold. You know, you're always searching. You're searching for that missing piece of the puzzle, and that's kind of like the misleading way of passion. But really, passion comes out of the energy that starts to spark when you tap into what you really want to do, what you really want to be, what you really want to explore. That's when passion starts to come through. So people say, I have a passion for this. I have a passion as a life coach. Why? Because there's an energy that I have when I am speaking in front of groups, or there's an energy that comes up when I'm coaching someone. Then the passion starts to flow. So if you want to find out what your passion is, follow the energy source, okay? I love it when she said that, follow the energy. So if you ever get hung up on that, as you're dreaming big in the next decade, and you're trying to think of passion, remember, what's the energy? When you're dreaming big, I can promise you there's an energy that's starting to flow. Okay, and all of a sudden you might think, you know what, in 2020, I've got these 20 big dreams, but in 2020, I have a lot of energy for this one particular area that I want to explore. And by exploring that, you're going to find that energy flowing. You're going to learn things. You're going to just, you know, you're going to grow by leaps and bounds. I really, really believe that. So we're going to dream big now for this next decade, okay? And over this next month, I'll share more with you from the Mel Robbins Best Decade Ever, and things that I find online, but the first thing I want you to do is go to the notes below. I'll do some little cliff notes of what I talked about as far as for 2019 and the last decade, kind of do a reflection of 5 to 7 things each, just so you can kind of see what happened, you know, that you maybe you forgot about some of the things that were big accomplishments that happened during the year and the decade. And then starting to dream big every single day, 5 to 7 things, writing them down of what your dreams are. Even if they change, it's okay. Listen, we're in an exciting time right now, not only for 2020, but also for the next decade. So I want to leave you with this. Don't forget to have a word for 2020, okay? And so that word could be dreaming. That word could be intentional, like it is for me. Maybe it's forgiveness. It might be a lot of things, but try to have a word for 2020. Because as we start to set those goals and take those big dreams and maybe focus in on one of those things this year, maybe that word that you've got is going to line right up with it. And then you know what? Think about what a word could be for the next decade. Maybe it's dreaming big, you know. Maybe it's a phrase, the sky's the limit. You know, even though it's going to change, let's get excited. Let's get excited about this decade. It's going to go fast, but it's going to be a really good decade because you're going to dream big and you're going to accomplish more things than you ever thought possible. And you, my friend, are going to go further and farther than you ever thought you could. So my friend, I leave you with this. Stay curious, continue to live a courageous life, and know that you are blessed. And this is going to be not only a fantastic year, but a fantastic, dreaming big decade for you. Until our next video, my friend, have a blessed day.